Question number one.
Okay.
Well, first I'm going to introduce the whole thing. Good afternoon. Today is May 4th, 2017. My name is Helene Tischler. I'm here at the Newton City Hall Library with Mr. George Rivetz.
Right.
Together, we're participating in the Newton Talks Oral History Project that's being conducted with the Newton Free Library, Historic Newton, and the Newton Senior Center. And thank you for being with us. It's really wonderful to have you here. So we are going to talk a lot about your experiences and like to just find out what your connection to Newton is.
What's that?
Your connection to Newton.
I live here.
Well,
Okay.
explain
That's
how long you've lived
how'd
here.
you get
Explain how
here?
you lived
Yeah.
here.
How
I
did you
own
get
a home,
here?
a two-family home in Newton Center,
Okay.
and that's my connection. I've lived here since
1972.
1972.
You moved over from Brookline and he's been
Ah.
living here
Moved from Brookline.
over 44 years.
44 years. Wonderful. And what were you doing before you entered the service?
I worked in the post office. I had two full-time, well, not full-time. I worked full-time in the post office for 52 years,
Oh, wow.
and I worked for the selling tickets for the Red Sox and Patriots for 38 years.
Okay. And before you went into the military, what
Yeah.
were you doing then?
Then,
Before the military.
Before the
Before.
Yeah, the Red
Way
Sox went before the military.
oh, that was before the military.
Not the Red Sox, though. That was
Not the Red Sox.
But
I was working in the,
post
post office
office.
before the 1936,
37.
37, and I got into the service 1942, and I stayed in the service to 1946.
Okay. How did you join and why did you get to choose the specific
No.
branch at that time? How did you get into that branch?
Well, originally I was deferred because I was the sole support of my elderly father. He was in his 80s, and they put me what they called 3A. That was a military deferment because I was the sole support of my father.
Okay.
But when Japan entered the war, after we were attacked by Pearl Harbor, the president decided that they want to eliminate the deferments, and they raised the budget that allowed my father to get $50 a month from the government so I wouldn't have to support him, so they can take me into the service.
So you were drafted at that point.
So I was drafted in that.
All right. And what branch did you
All right.
serve in?
Where I worked in the post office, originally I was assigned to take care of the mail, all the different mailings that the servicemen mailed to home and received and everything. It had to do with the post office.
Right.
So they put me in to the mailing service of the Army, stationed in South Boston.
Okay.
And I stayed there from 1942 to 1944. Then the law came out. Everybody has to serve at least a year overseas. That's when I decided to kill myself. But it didn't work.
Okay.
So I took a physical, I got a physical, and then I had to serve at least a year overseas. But I had a choice, either go into the infantry or get a job on a troop ship
Okay.
and that carried a division of troops all over the world. I stayed there from 44 to 46. We carried troops all over England, Africa, Egypt, eventually Manila,
Uh-huh.
Hawaii. We were invading Japan, Italy,
Hmm.
France, everywhere in the world that we had troops. We carried the ship. By my ship, 20,000 troops. Whenever we went in a convoy
Right.
to the Atlantic,
Right.
dropped the troops off, came home,
Got new.
refilled
Uh-huh.
the ship again, kept going back and forth,
Oh my
back and
goodness.
forth, while the war was on in Europe.
And what did you do on the ship?
On the ship, you ever hear of a PX?
Yes.
A post exchange.
Uh-huh.
We worked, 6 of us, we worked in the PX, taking care of like a store, like a grocery, like a store. Whatever the troops wanted, we sold them. And that's what we did.
All right. And you supplied them, what did you supply them with, for example?
Pardon?
What did you give, what did you sell? What did you supply
We
them
sold
with?
everything. Food,
Mm-hmm.
well, basically whatever any store would sell. Ice cream, food, toothpaste. I don't know, anything that the soldier needed, cookies, crackers, bread, whatever. Now, if they wanted, now we're talking of 20,000 troops.
Right.
We didn't take care of 20,000. If you wanted a Coke, you ordered 1,000 bottles of Coke,
Mm-hmm.
but they signified a half a dozen troops from their 20,000 to come down to the basement there, and where we had the bulk of our food, and they picked out 1,000 bottles of Coke
Right.
and passed them around. But we handled the individual requests, the
Right.
small requests,
Right. In the PX.
and we collected French coins, British coins, wherever country we were.
Did you get off the ship at any
Oh,
point?
sure. I have some of the stories to tell you.
Okay.
When we dropped the troops off, before we reconditioned the ship, put more oil in there, we straightened to get the return trip back home. We were based at New York,
Mm-hmm.
New York Harbor. So we had maybe about 4 or 5 days to take it easy, more or less, to look around
Right.
the
Before
different
you
countries
got back on.
before we had to go back. So my first trip was Africa.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I had a little French in high school, so I could speak a little French. But my basic, real first trip was England. We brought over 20. This was before Pearl Harbor. We were helping the British fight we weren't fighting, but we were helping them fight the Germans.
Mm-hmm.
So my first trip was England. You want me to tell you one of my...
Yes, certainly.
Story.
What was something
Did
very
you ever hear-
memorable?
Did you ever hear of Piccadilly Circus in England?
Yes.
How do you know that?
Yeah.
Well, I visited England. So
And you visited Piccadilly Circus?
certainly.
But it's not a circus, is it?
No.
I was brought up in the slums of Boston. You know part of Boston where North Station is?
Mm-hmm.
All right. You know where the Boston Garden is?
Yes.
That's where I lived, right around the area of the Boston Garden. And whenever there was a circus, You ever hear of Ringling Brothers, Barnum
Sure,
and Bailey?
sure.
Well, that to me is a circus.
Uh,
So when they tell me I'm in England, let's sightsee, let's go to Piccadilly Circus. So I said, wonderful. I haven't been to a circus since I was a child. You're smiling because you know that it wasn't a circus.
Sure.
So I go, let's go to the circus. I haven't been to a circus since I was 8 years old. We go there, I pay $15 for admittance, and after an hour, I say to the girl, "Where are the elephants?" She says to her boyfriend, "He called me an elephant.
No.
He beat me up and he threw me out." It wasn't until I was thrown out in the middle of London until I found out it wasn't a circus.
How old were you then?
Too old to know better. I was. Do you know what it really was? Are you too young to know? A house of prostitution. And I asked her, "Where are the elephants?" She thought I called her an
Oh
elephant.
no.
I was 20 years old at the time.
Okay. And how was the rest of the time adapting to the military? When you got on the ship,
Yeah.
was it very difficult for you to adjust? Had you been through any training beforehand?
No.
So what was it like for you? The physical quarters, the barracks?
Seasick. It was a new experience. It was a giant ship of 35,000 ton. It was originally a private liner. The Moore McCormick lines, they had I was on the Uruguay.
Mm-hmm.
They had 3 sister ships during the war: Uruguay, the Brazil, and the Argentina. Whenever we went to Europe or Africa, we went in the convoy with those 3 ships. Naturally, we're traveling through the Atlantic in a convoy. The Germans were waiting. The planes attacked us, submarines attacked us, ships attacked us, and we were in constant danger. We were sunk once right outside the English Channel. Luckily, we were right at the border of England, so the British sent a lot of ships and a lot of troops to save us.
Okay. So were there any casualties from that bombing? Or
Pardon?
did most people survive that bombing?
Oh, sure.
Oh, good.
Most of us survived. And from there, we went into the invasion of Normandy.
Mm-hmm.
We also was the invasion of southern France. We didn't go into France right away. We helped the Normandy invasion, but we also fought to invade southern France and Africa. Well, originally, we were in Africa first.
Mm-hmm.
From Africa, we went to southern France. And from southern France to Italy. In fact, I have a picture at home. I was on the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Only I called it pizza. And that's when I learned how to eat pizza. The Leaning Tower of Pisa. We were overlooking the big souvenir there. We had a wonderful time.
So,
It was dangerous,
right, right.
but we survived. We had protection, and it was a war, and we just hoped that we'd survive.
Right. And
But,
what else do you
well, I
learn?
was, for 2 years, I was in the service before the war, before the the ship,
Right,
as I was in the post office there.
right, right. And what did you find that you remember the most about those
How I
experiences?
survived.
Yeah, positive or negative, certainly in the battle
Well,
situations.
Let me see. There was a time, did you ever hear of the Battle of the Bulge?
Yes.
How come? You fought there?
No. I was born after the war, but I do know about the Battle
You
of the
heard
Bulge.
about the Battle of the Bulge.
Yes.
Now, the Battle of the Bulge was the final battle that took place between Germany and England, British, and this country. The Battle of the Bulge took place in Belgium. Germany was just about finished. They made a very big mistake when they invaded Russia. Originally, Hitler started the war by invading Poland, all the Baltic countries. It took him 8 days to conquer France. 8 days, that's all. And they were fighting, sending planes over to England constantly. In fact, the worst traitor that I can tell. John Kennedy's father was the ambassador to England, Joseph Kennedy. Now he's supposed to be on our side, right? Wrong. When Germany got ready to invade England, they were sending thousands and thousands of planes into England constantly, bombing all parts of England, killing thousands. And when Japan invaded Pearl Harbor, naturally, we became part of the war.
Right.
So now we're on England's side. So when Germany is ready to invade England, Joseph Kennedy said to President Roosevelt, "Don't stop them." British, because he's an Irish Catholic, and the Irish hated the English because part of Ireland is divided between Northern Ireland, and you didn't know that the Irish and English were bitter enemies.
Right.
You knew that.
Right, right.
So Joseph Kennedy, who was an ardent Irish Catholic, said to Roosevelt, "Don't stop them. Let England fall. They don't deserve anything better." And that's when Roosevelt fired him.
Fortunately, we didn't heed that
And
advice. But you were telling us a little bit about the Battle of the Bulge.
Oh, the Battle of the Bulge.
And what do you remember, and what role did you have in
What
that?
I remember was the Battle of the Bulge. We came into Bastogne, Bastogene, in Belgium.
Right.
And it turned out to be the last battle in Europe. What originally happened when Hitler invaded Europe, he had a treaty with Stalin. Stay away. We're friends. Stay here. Let me conquer Europe. You do whatever you want in Asia, whatever, but let me conquer Europe. And they had a deal going. But for whatever reason, maybe he got too confident, Hitler did, but once he conquered France and was about to conquer England, he got too greedy, and he decided, why not invade Russia too?
Mm-hmm.
Did you know that he invaded Russia and came within this much of conquering Russia? They were in Moscow, they were in Leningrad, they were in the Balkans. I mean, forget the southern part of Russia. They came within this much of conquering Russia. But the bad features for Hitler, he picked the wrong time of the year, middle of the winter.
Right, like Napoleon.
And the Russians, they're used to
Forge.
0-degree temperature.
Right.
And
what time of year was the Battle of the Bulge? It was
All
also winter, wasn't
so we
it?
come in to the last. Hitler was just about. Russia had already invaded Germany from the east.
Right.
We're coming up, General Patton and General Clark and Bradley. They're coming up from Africa, southern France, into Germany. We're going to invade Germany. So we met at Belgium, at Bastogne. We brought 25,000 troops, and we dropped them in the city of Bastogne. And that would help conquer the rest of Germany, because Italy was done.
Mm-hmm.
Italy had already surrendered. We had already invaded Italy. Russia was about to invade Germany. We allowed Russia to invade Germany as long as they allowed us to invade France and Belgium and Italy and everything. So we bring the ship there, and all of a sudden, 25,000 troops are in Bastogne, among other ships and troops. And the Germans, as a last resort, they sent 1,000 planes to attack us.
Mm-hmm.
We sent 1,000 planes from Africa, France, and England to attack the German planes. So 2,000 planes over the ocean, over the high seas, over the country, Bastogne. So they made us all go below deck for safety,
Mm-hmm.
while the fighting was going on above us. And all we heard for 4.5 hours, one bomb after the other, one attack after the other. 2,000 planes at one time. And we're below deck, not knowing if we're going to be sunk or drowned or the middle of the ocean. And I'm happy to say, as you can tell,
Yes, thank goodness
I survived.
that you survived it. So what was the aftermath? Did you get off at
so
that
we got
point?
so finally, after we drove the Germans away, and they brought us back up, and that was the end of. And that's when Hitler killed himself. And that was the end of the war. But not for me.
Okay.
I had, in those days, you need a certain amount, 80 points of service, and you can be discharged.
Uh-huh.
I was in the service at that time, 42 to 45. 3 years, I had over 100 points. I had more ribbons, more medals than Eisenhower and MacArthur
That's
combined.
amazing.
Every time I was overseas,
They gave you a medal.
another ribbon, an overseas ribbon. Every time we would be attacked, a medal that we were attacked, that could be killed. I had 4 rows of ribbons and medals every 6 months. On your sleeve, you had a bar that consisted of 6 months of service. I'm in there for 4.5 years. I have 2 rows of
Amazing.
bars, 8 rows of ribbons and medals. People saluted me, and I was only a private.
That's amazing.
And
Yes. So, how did the service end for you?
oh yeah, so I have enough points to get discharged. Wrong.
Ah.
There's still a war on in Japan. There's still somebody to beat, to fight in the West Coast. So, what did they do? They transferred us to San Francisco so we can prepare for the invasion of Japan. So we went through the Suez Canal. We were from Africa. We went to the Suez Canal, crossed the Atlantic, entered the Panama Canal, and came to San Francisco. And that was our base of operation. So we started to, once we were in San Francisco, we were getting ready to send troops to Manila to reconquer the Philippines once they took MacArthur out and sent him to Australia to get ready to invade Japan. He had already lost the Philippine Islands. MacArthur had lost, so they took him out and sent him to Australia to prepare the invasion of Japan. So we brought troops to Hawaii, Guam, and there's a little country right next to the Philippines, Leyte, if you ever heard of it. And we dropped anchor at Leyte and Manila, and eventually we conquered Manila.
So you were in Manila.
I was in Manila, and that brings me to my next adventure.
Okay.
Besides Piccadilly Circus, besides the Battle of the Bulge, my next major adventure, after we conquered Manila, what would a normal soldier say? Sightsee. I want to see what the Philippines look like, what Manila looks like. I had geography
Sure.
in school, grammar
Right,
school.
right.
I heard about the Philippines, and I wanted to see it. So, once we had conquered Manila, the Philippines, and we're getting ready to invade Japan, so we bring our troops into Manila, and I said, let's sightsee the Philippine Island. So I went off the ship, and right outside Leyte, the Japanese had dropped hundreds of bombs in Manila Bay when they lost the war there. So we couldn't go into Manila Bay. So right outside Manila, Leyte, the Bay of Leyte, there's a little ship that would take us into the harbor, but it was a Navy ship, and it was a rope ladder. So you're down there. It's not a normal
Like a ladder.
it was the normal, what do you call the
Gangplank?
Oh no,
or
gangplank.
when you a gangplank.
Yes,
Gangplank.
It wasn't a
Right.
normal gangplank. It was rope, and it was 10 feet above the ship.
Oh.
10 feet. And you had to jump, but you had to be careful that the waves were
Oh,
moving the ship all over the place.
Sure.
If you jumped at the wrong time, you drowned or you're dead, you hit your head on the ship. What to do? There was 8 of us. 8 of us that worked in the PX.
Mm-hmm.
So I panicked. I'm the first guy down the rope ladder, and 7 people are behind me waiting to jump. I panicked. I want to get back on the ship. I don't want to go to Manila anymore. I'm afraid. But there's 7 people behind me. Come on, jump. We don't want to go back. You're the first one. And 7 guys didn't want to go back, and so I can get off the ship. So what did the guy in back of me do? Stamped on my hands
Oh.
and made me let go of
So
the
you,
rope.
you jumped.
I had to jump. And where did I jump? Into the ocean.
Mm.
I don't know how to swim.
Oh.
So what do? Drown. But I didn't drown.
So who got you out?
Well, once I got into the ocean, there was all the sailors on that little ship. They all jumped in. They all jumped in overboard. Life jackets, everything. And they picked me right up.
Okay. So did you ever get to see Manila?
No.
Okay.
They're all that.
I no ever wanted to see Manila.
And so when did your service actually end?
When the atomic bomb was dropped in August. We were ready to invade Japan around September. August, the 2 atomic bombs were dropped and Japan surrendered. We didn't have to invade. So,
Did you come home at that point?
not quite.
Ah.
Mhm.
We went back. We brought the troops into Japan, the Army of Occupation, more or less, and they were going to recondition the ship, and turn it back into a private ship again. It was a luxury liner,
Mhm.
and they gave me a choice to stay, either get discharged. Once they sent me back to the States, once the ship went back to San Francisco, I would be eventually a discharged serviceman. I had more than enough time. It was 1946.
Right.
I served my time faithfully, but they gave me a choice. If I wanted to wait until they reconditioned the ship and brought this diplomats that had been interned in Japan and Germany, that had been interned, we were going to bring them back to their native countries. And that meant 6 months more for them to recondition it. I could have done that. I would have been a sergeant. I would have had a wonderful time. They put a swimming pool in. It was a luxury line.
Mm-hmm.
But I had served. I had served almost 5 years. I said, enough is enough already.
Okay. So do you remember what it
Wait
was?
a minute.
Oh, I'm
Wait.
sorry.
I'm not done yet.
Oh, okay. There's more.
Not much.
That's great.
2 things.
Okay.
Would you say I'm black or white?
You have a wonderful tan in these pictures.
Would you say I'm not a black person?
No, you just look very tan and very handsome in
Black.
these after
Never
the
mind.
war.
Would you say I'm black? You know I'm not, but would you think
So
I'm visiting my sister. I'm on a furlough waiting to be discharged, I have a sister lived in Texas.
Ah, that's how you got to Texas.
Yeah.
Texas, they have a law down
Yeah,
south.
Sure.
The black people have to go in the back of the bus. So I'm visiting my sister. You want to see a black person?
They're wonderful.
Bring it down there.
So you had a good transition coming back after
Yeah.
the Army? What was it like to get home?
It was wonderful because I knew it was the end. Enough.
You were more than ready.
I was more than ready.
But how did it sort of affect your life, all these experiences?
I met
What have
my
you
wife,
found? Okay.
so that affected me. I met Barry then.
And what was your feeling about the war and the military in general after having served all those years?
Well, I was lucky, I felt. I survived 2 sinkings. I survived that Manila incident,
Right.
and thank God I came out of it
It's amazing.
alive.
It's amazing.
And,
No, you have wonderful stories to tell.
well, there's one more.
Just
I
one
think so, we're
one
wrapping
more
up.
question. What
Yeah.
would you like people to remember in 100 years from now? Since this is a project that we hope will last for a while, and your
Well,
tape and your testimony, what would you like people to remember or know?
that I survived. That
That's
I-
that's important.
I mean, I'm an ordinary, normal person. I didn't know how to swim. I'm not a hero. I wouldn't. I'm not a Marine. I wouldn't go out of my way to volunteer into the service. But when I had to serve, I did my duty, and I served honorably with 100 different ribbons and medals.
Amazing.
And let me tell you the final story.
Okay, we have time, I think.
I'm visiting my sister in Texas, and I go on the bus. The bus driver says, "You lousy nigger, get in the back of the bus.
Oh no.
Get in the back of the bus." Take a look at that. I don't blame him. I says, "Who, me?" He says, "Yeah, you lousy nigger. Get in the back of the bus or I'll throw you off." I said, "I'm white." He says, "You're a damn liar. You're not white. Look at you."
That's amazing.
I had to take out luckily, I had my ID from the Army.
And you could show him.
It says white. He
That's
didn't believe it.
unbelievable.
He said, "That's not you."
That's amazing. So then you went from Texas back to
Home.
Boston?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And never went down south again.
Yeah.
Well, I had a tan.
I can understand that. So
Take a
you
look
stayed
at it.
in the Boston area then?
Always been in Boston from the minute I was born. I was born, any part of Boston?
Yes, you would.
Yes.
You know the West End?
Yes. a
How do
little
you know
bit,
that?
Just from being here for a
Yeah.
while, but
The West End consisted from Scully Square to the Mass General Hospital, North Station. We lived in Beacon Hill. I was almost 100 years old. Did you know I'm almost 100? 99?
Just
Wonderful.
99 years of age. I
it's
still
amazing.
drive.
Amazing.
That's amazing. And you've told some wonderful stories.
Oh,
We're so happy that you were able to do this with us.
oh, the final story
Okay.
Not
was,
sure if they
Do we have
have
a
time.
chance for one more?
the
We've
final
got a couple of
story
minutes there, so
was,
make it
One
quick,
more
Dad.
that you'd like people
That's
to
it.
Very
know
quick,
or
Dad.
remember. No, these are wonderful.
no, this will only take
Really?
a second. We were told by the captain of the ship, they thanked us for all that we did for them while they were in the Army. And he said, anytime you want to use our ship, free of charge, any trip.
Really? Oh my goodness. This is
Yeah,
beautiful.
I know.
Yeah,
And when was this?
that was right after I was married.
That is unbelievable.
He was married in
And that was-
1947.
These are amazing. So I'm hoping they can take some photos of these. And thank you so much for doing this.
Oh,
It's
it's
really
my
been an honor.
I'm glad I could do it because
It's amazing.
I have fond memories.
No, but
Thank
it's
God.
wonderful to share this. Thank you for
you so
sharing it
Oh,
and to be part of this
you don't need
Newton
more
all right, that's
Talks
it.
oral project.
But I
really,
do
it's
have-
wonderful.
One more story. I'm not going to tell it to you because you don't have the time.
No, but you've told us some wonderful
That's
things.
a Boston Globe.
Oh,
I helped a person dying. I stayed with him
This is
from the
Golden
time
Mayer
he had a
House.
stroke.
Yes.
He was in the army. He was the same age as I was. We served in the same area,
really?
and this was at the Golden Mayer house right over here.
And
And
you were written up in the
86
Globe.
years old, and he was dying, and I stayed with him until he died.
That was very kind, really very thoughtful.
Thank you.
Can we get some of these too? We'll take some photos of these, if that's okay with you.
Huh?
Yeah.
We'll take
We're
some
gonna take some
pictures of
photos.
these so
Sure.
we can include
you.
that.
Take pictures of that
Thank
too.
you so
And
much.
take pictures of my
Yeah,
my
right.
black.
You were very
you.
handsome.
I didn't say I wasn't handsome.